A major league scandal rocks a hometown Little League champion. Chicago reacts to the rise and fall of Jackie Robinson West.
I think that the adults should have been punished, but not the kids.
The coaches and the authorities who are in charge should have known, and they should have rectified that before even going in for the championship.
The new governor delivers a hardball pitch at unions representing state employees, ordering an end to the so-called fair share union fees.
These forced union dues are a critical cog in the corrupt bargain that is crushing taxpayers. And government union bargaining and government union political activity are inextricably linked.
As the mayor's race heads into the home stretch, Emanuel rolls up more endorsements from major newspapers and political heavyweights. And candidate Willie Wilson raises eyebrows with racially charged remarks.
And to the whiteies here, I'm gonna let you know I ain't prejudiced, all right? All right? No. I'm gonna just call it like it is, all right?
And calling it like it is, our panelists. Journalist Robin Robinson, Pat Hughes, spokesperson for the Illinois Opportunity Project, and journalist Mary Frances Bragle. Hello and welcome, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you for
So the question of an elected or an appointed school board that's going to be on the ballot, Robin, good idea, bad idea?
Well, you know, any new idea has to be considered. The accountability argument hasn't worked. We've never voted a mayor out of office, and our schools have been doing crap. So I don't know how we're holding somebody accountable. And if it's a matter of elected school boards tend to get in more debt, I think it's obvious we need to spend more. You know, no one's had the political will to fund schools to the level they should be funded or to change the formula so that they're funded equitably. We know it's not working. The gap has only widened over the last 20 years. If you could have an elected school board and control those elections so that special interests don't own them, then I think you might have you might as well try it.
But that's a big if, Pat.
It is a big if, and typically I'm in favor of more democracy and more elections. And as much as I'm loath to agree with Joe Moore and Rahm Emanuel, I have to say that I think in Chicago under these circumstances, particularly given the political influence of Karen Lewis and the CTU, that we should keep it as an appointed board. And really the issue that I think we should be focusing on to improve the Chicago public schools is not this issue. It's, vouchers, school choice, giving people an opportunity to get out of failing schools.
That's a debate for another day.
I think if we can get around that, then we can.
But on this one, elected or appointed, Mary Frances?
Elected. I think that people have the right to have more power about what's going on in their school system. I think, overall, Rahm Emanuel it's about setting an agenda for himself. If he can turn around Chicago public schools, this would be huge for him, not only at this level, but at the national level if he decides to go that way. So that's the reason why I believe that he still wants to keep it in his hands, because it's about power and what he can do for his career, I believe. But I think that at the end of the day, it needs to be elected.
What about the argument, Robin, that an elected school board is going to bring not only more politics, but a lot more money into the races? In California, for example, millions of dollars are now spent on these school board campaigns.
Well, the whole idea of campaign funding reform goes way beyond the elected school board. You've seen where money is an issue everywhere. Rahm Emanuel has more money than anyone else. Willie Wilson came in as a millionaire and suddenly supplanted Doc Walls, though he wasn't ahead of him in the polls. We have this concept that if you're rich, you can win. And I think that election campaign funding reform is a big issue. I happen to think that super PACs have ruined the process. But if you can make special rules for a school board election that limits, the types of funding that provides, I'm sorry, TV people, free commercials that really lets people see who they are, because
this is a public station.
Well, okay, right, yeah, okay, they can have their commercials here. But as the consultant pointed out, he's seen good and bad with elected and appointed. It's about the skill set, and I think it's also about the vested interest. That if you have people who reflect the vested interests of the students in Chicago public schools, even if they do go into more debt than appointed school boards because they don't have to worry about the mayor's budget, and they say, look, we'll pay for it. We got to make sure these kids have what they need. Right now, it's just not fair. And I think that an elected school board might have a little more impetus to talk about. No one talks about the funding formula anymore. How much more students get in districts, just 20 miles away versus right here in Chicago.
But you raised an interesting question, which is representation. So about 90% of the students in the Chicago public schools are either African American or Latino. What guarantee is there if there's an elected school board that representation would mirror that in any way.
Well, there's no guarantee. There's no guarantee in anything, right? So you have to try, and I think it's about time that we have an alternative to what we've been seeing, because I don't necessarily believe that what we've been seeing with appointed is working.
And maybe this will spur people to vote. They'll have an issue that resonates with them, because oftentimes people just kind of opt out and say, well, I'm not interested in the water reclamation district or whatever's on the ballot, but the school board I am, and they'll take the time to. And if we did it in a district, you know, like you vote for someone who represents your district, not like the 50 aldermanic wards, the unmanageable thing we have going there. But I think that it might spur some voter turnout.
Pat, you disagree?
I'm concerned with the influence of the Chicago Teachers Union on those elections, and then that board having to be beholden to the person that helped get them elected, Karen Lewis and CTU, when it comes time to negotiate teacher contracts and everything else. I mean, that's a problem that we have statewide, where public sector unions are negotiating directly with the folks who they're getting elected. And I don't think, given the size of the budget for the Chicago Public Schools and given the politics involved, that this is the time and place to do that. And it's hard for me to say that because I have to agree with Mayor Emanuel.
And that really bothers you.
It bothers me terribly.
We have to move to another story involving school children, and this is the unfortunate development where Jackie Robinson West has been stripped of its national title for the Little League Championship. The head of the International Little League called it a heartbreaking decision, but was it the correct decision?
No, it wasn't the correct decision. And actually, I credit Mayor Emanuel for going and making a phone call here and trying to reverse this. This is about the kids. They worked hard and long and were excited. I can guarantee you they had no idea about what was going on and who was being selected. That has nothing to do with what happened.
We don't even know what was going on.
They worked really hard. Exactly. They worked really, really hard to get that title on their own, and it should remain with them.
But at the same time, the Little League says that the parents not only broke the rules, but they fabricated
Then hold the
map.
parents accountable and start naming who these parents are publicly.
Here's the problem, right? What happened was the coaches and the administrators at Jackie Robinson stacked the team. So every level of competition, and I have a son that plays baseball now and I coach him. Every level of competition, from Illinois to the Great Midwest Championships, all the way to Williamsport, was all stacked in their favor. Now, the kids, I feel terrible for the kids. Having a son that goes through that right now, it's a terrible feeling as a parent. But you cannot not punish the adults for this behavior. And if there is no repercussion, like this repercussion, adults are going to continue to behave this way. And I feel bad for the kids. They're caught in the crossfire. I saw today that Jesse Jackson and Operation Push are going to file a lawsuit. This is where this is heading. And now the kids are going to be cannon fodder for adults having further arguments about this. Explain to the children what the adults did. Teach them not to behave this way going forward. But absolutely, this was the right decision.
Robin,
Will
I get
you
the
also
sense
be able
you
to explain
disagree.
to the children that this is a level playing field, and any team that had done this, and no other teams have done this, and anybody who's done this has gotten caught, or is this a lesson in the microscope at the top of the ladder? There may be a myriad of teams who have, broken some boundary rules. And let's think about the boundaries and where you live and how mobile the African American community is here because of poverty, because of the closing of the housing projects. Children change schools in African American communities 10 times more than they do in Winnetka. There's just a whole 50 years of racist housing policy, and then to have a housing boundary define where you can choose your team from. When you have African Americans who never have an opportunity to play baseball, you talk about feeling for your son. Imagine for the parent who can't find a Little League team for their child. Sure. I think on a technicality, when you have had major league teams with someone's found guilty of doping and they're deflating the balls and they punish the player, they don't say the whole team loses the whole championship. I think it's overkill. I also think that there's not been transparency. We've not seen any details about what proved these allegations. I do not blame the coach who complained about it. Mm-hmm. I'm not of that ilk, because you do want to say, look, if we're going to have these rules, let's play by them. But it doesn't really change what happened.
But Robin,
some people say these boundaries were invented so that white teams could stay white and black teams would stay black.
You're raising this point, and Pat did as well, that it's already becoming a very racially charged issue.
Why was it so
Jackson,
exciting?
Father Flager come out, and already, without really any evidence suggesting that this is because it's an African-American team.
We don't have any evidence either way.
Robin, I'll say why it was exciting for me, because we watched all of it. It was exciting to see wonderful kids from my hometown win this championship, regardless of what color they were.
It was because they were unlikely. It's because they were the underdog, and that's why it was exciting.
As it turned out, they weren't the underdog. They were stacked. The competition was stacked, as if they had used older boys. You can't.
How is it using someone outside your boundary, like using an older boy?
Because that's how these teams are formatted, right? So every other team is within a specific boundary. And I'd love to go next door and pick up that big stud pitcher that's outside of my district to win. That's what they did, and none of the other teams were doing that.
How do we know that? Did we investigate all the other teams?
No, but I'm happy to have that investigation.
Who wants to do all that? Okay, we may now. Yes,
well,
but
then you've ruined the integrity of the entire system. You've ruined the integrity of the system to promote a narrative, which we have too much of, quite frankly, Chris.
So why
in our
not
society.
punish the adults? Say if you do this, you're going to lose your position with Little League. Why would you take the championship away from the whole team? Is that what lesson are you teaching them?
Because they won it on the field, but unfairly. They won it on
they
the field.
They didn't win it unfairly.
They
the
didn't
adults
win it.
did.
Exactly.
What lesson are you teaching these
They were
kids?
just playing baseball, right?
Yeah, but they were playing baseball
and
with
they trained and practiced for a long time.
They were playing baseball with unfair competition.
They already know about unfairness.
Here in Chicago, as you've all said, this was an incredibly poignant story, not only because of the team being an African-American team, but because that summer we had a lot of violence, and this was a great story for Chicago. We had a parade. These kids went to see the White House. What kind of a letdown now is it for the city after this incredible summer?
I don't necessarily see that people look at it as a letdown for the city. It's a letdown for the kids, is exactly how they're looking at it. The kids worked really, really hard for this trophy, this award, this championship. And so the city went ahead and, of course, congratulate all of them. And they should have had the parade and going to the White House. That should follow. That's automatic, right? So it's not a letdown for the city. It's just a letdown for the kids overall. And unfortunately, even if they were given back this title, this will always follow them from now on. And this is to blame the parents that are blamed for this and not the kids.
We have to move on to another form of hardball. Our new governor, Rauner, issued an executive order allowing some state employees to opt out of fair share fees that go for union expenses. Robin, is this a frontal assault on public employee unions in Illinois? I
just can't find where in any of his campaign speeches he says, and what I'm going to do because of my feeling about unions is to start the dismantling of it. And it's an executive order to say we're going to go to court for the next, X number of months. He's hired the most expensive lawyer
You're
in the state.
talking about Dan Webb, the former U.S. attorney.
Exactly. And I don't think it's that unexpected. It's been successful in other states, but he's not going to, I don't think, be able to go as far as, Wisconsin or Indiana simply because of the makeup of the legislature. He can't legislate because he won't get the support in Springfield. I think that people need to look at what they think the value of unions is. I mean, I think that it's pretty well documented that they kind of help income disparity. Mm-hmm. They put a ceiling and a floor, raise the floor, lower the ceiling in terms of pay, and it's really a matter of what you believe about unions as to how hard you think that this should be fought or supported. I think it's not unexpected from him.
I think it's a question of individual liberty. If you don't want to belong to a union or have a union represent you in negotiating your deal with your employer, you shouldn't have to. And frankly, the way it's structured now, where these fair share fees have to be paid to the union, is a violation of the constitutional rights of a worker who doesn't want to be affiliated. It's a violation of their First Amendment freedom of speech rights. It's a violation of their First Amendment freedom of association rights. And I think the way the governor has approached it is really, really smart. He's asking for a declaratory judgment. The funds that will be paid during the period while the case is being resolved are being segregated. So if, in the event that he loses the case, the union will still get their money. But I have to tell you, the 5 Supreme Court justices who decided the most recent case, the Harris case, have given an indication that this fair share fees are unconstitutional. My guess is that's how they're going to ultimately decide. So I think this is the right move. I think it's good for individual liberty. I think it's good for workers. And if someone wants to belong to the public sector union, God bless them.
Let me bring in what the executive director of the largest state employee union, which is AFSCME, Roberta Lynch, has said. She says this is a blatantly illegal abuse of power. Those sound like fighting words, Mary Frances.
Well, of course, that's a standard statement that they're going to say as well. I used to have to be part of a union for my job, and I hated paying the couple $100 I had to pay monthly on this stuff. We've all seen what some of the top leaders of unions make. Couple of $100,000 a piece. Do I absolutely believe that all the money that I'm paying is going towards my goodwill? No, absolutely not. I hate it. So I think it's great. It's a great move on the governor's part. I think it's a great move for the state, and it's not going to hurt the middle classes.
But the argument is that the money that you pay goes into negotiating a contract, and you will get the same benefit as every other union.
Then why do we see these union leaders making $400,000 and $500,000 and $600,000 a year?
How can you complain about union leaders making $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 when the CEOs are making $400,000, $500,000, $600,000, or 4 or 5 million. The income disparity, the job that you wanted that happened to be union got to be maybe that great job because of the work the union had done in the years before you were even of working age. So it's all well and good to say now, hey, this is a good job and I don't need a union. But when you think about what unrepresented workers were, how they were being treated prior to the union movement in this country, that's not something I think you want to go back to. And if you happen to be in a sector where there's more workers than there are jobs, and people can say, well, I'm not going to pay you that much, and I'm not going to give you that break, and I'm not going to give you, other things that the union may negotiate for you. I'm going to fire you when I think you're too old or overpaid, or then I think that you have to look at the benefits that have been brought that you now say you'd like to have for free.
Listen, there are no guarantees, and people I think that in unions believe that sometimes if there are guarantees, they're always going to have. There are no guarantees. No. I think that what they're going to face now, if this stands up for what the governor wants, is bullying and intimidation in the workplace. For people that choose that they do not want to pay dues, I think other people that are paying dues, that's going to be the next story out of this.
Well, maybe
Pat, I want to raise a question
that
that Robin actually brought up, which is we have seen now in Wisconsin Governor Walker, we've seen in Indiana next door, Mitch Daniels make great inroads in lowering the power of the unions. But here in Illinois, the Democrats have a supermajority. Is this going to be fundamentally different in this state?
It's going to be a little bit different, but I think the governor and the people that he is trying to support are working to change that, using Daniels and Walker as an example. I think this union issue is a question of individual liberty, and if you look at these states that have right-to-work laws, once you adjust for cost of living increases and the differences in cost of living in the states, right-to-work states, the compensation comparatively in the industries are the same, and job growth is on the rise. So I think that Governor Rauner sees that our state is near bankrupt, we're in terrible circumstances, and the structural change that has to come forward has got to come from the top down, which is from the governor himself. And I applaud this effort, and I think it's correct, and more to the point, I think it's correct constitutionally.
We got to move to the city desk here. We've got an election coming up for mayor and alderman. Rahm Emanuel has picked up all kinds of endorsements over the last few weeks. The newspapers here, Trib, Sun-Times, Crane, Chicago Business. Do these endorsements make a big difference, Mary Frances?
I don't believe so. I mean, I think they used to probably years ago. I don't believe they carry as much weight any longer. I think that they're good for possibly fundraising a little bit here and there. But at the end of the day, people aren't necessarily buying what the newspapers have to say in there, because not everybody trusts the newspapers anyway.
But people are paying attention to commercials, and Emanuel is absolutely saturating the airwaves, Pat.
Yeah, I mean, he's got all the money. He's, of course, well-known. This was but he's not popular. This was a great opportunity for someone from maybe the center-right sphere to come in and run in this race. But what we have is some of the same old, and I think that Mayor Emanuel is going to win. And that's too bad, because he doesn't do the two things that a mayor should do, which is make sure his populace is safe and correctly educate the population. He doesn't do either of those things. But there just is no challenger. I think that Willie Wilson is an impressive story, an impressive guy, and he does talk in a way, and I agree with some of the things he talks about, right to work and sort of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. I like that element of it, but there's no real challenger here, and it's too bad because there should have been.
Well, Garcia does have commercials out beginning this week, Robin, so he's getting some presence there.
He does, and the mayor's commercials have, as of the last couple of days, changed their tone. There's a little bit of attack of Garcia in the beginning of his new commercials, which I don't think is such a great idea, because he talks about the largest tax increase in the city of Chicago's history, and people who really remember will remember that was with Harold Washington, and to keep from laying off a bunch of police officers. And then he talks about Garcia, having been a tax cheat. Well, if anybody's never owed the IRS some money because something they did on their tax returns was found, we're not going to accept that. I think people may relate to that more than they are opposed to say, oh, he's a bad guy. But I think the fact that there are so many challengers, first of all, is kind of helps Mayor Emanuel. But I think that being a man who's conscious of his legacy, that one thing all this challenge has brought, and one thing I thought about the debate, was these people all have ideas and they are pointing out his weaknesses. And I can see him making mental notes. I have to fix that before next time. Oh, I got to take care of what's that they quote? We can't have that. The fact that black business has gone down over the last 10 years dramatically. The fact that the gap is widening. That Chicago is getting more and more segregated. I mean, things that he needs to focus on. And he can say, we brought all these jobs, and then you say, but in these communities, jobs have been lost. Downtown looks great, but the neighborhoods look terrible. And I think that you will see, if he wins, that he will try to plug those holes. And so I think that the rigorous debate, with all these challengers has been a good thing, whoever wins.
One of those challengers, of course, is Willie Wilson. We saw the little clip. He made some remarks saying he wasn't prejudiced against whiteys. Does that mean anything for
Do you know for sure
his
that that's what
campaign?
he said, first of all?
It was on
But
the
you heard him
tape.
speak. He said, you know, and for you white, he could have been saying for you white people here in the room, and it came out whiteys.
But you know what, though, the minute he
Doesn't
said
matter.
that,
He
well,
says
the
he
minute I
doesn't
said
know if he said it.
Yeah,
He's
but
not
you know what?
sure.
Okay, if he allegedly said it, the minute I heard it, he allegedly said this, his campaign was over, as far as I'm concerned. It was just, it's uncalled for. I don't know if at this point it's so late in the game that anything for shock value, which some people will say, but I just.
Oh, I don't think he did it intentionally if he said it. I think that he acknowledges, and if you speak with him for any longer than 30 seconds, you know that there is a speech enunciation issue there. And I don't think, you know, I think he might have been putting 2 or 3 words together. He didn't intend to say it if he said it. Well, first of all, he wouldn't, if he really felt that way, that he called people, you know, out of their names all the time, he probably wouldn't say it publicly. But I do think that it's kind of a non-issue. He stated that he has struggles to be comfortable around white people. He stated that in his book, and I think that's honesty.
Very quickly, is the mayor going to avoid a runoff? We've got like 10 seconds left.
Yes.
He is. Pat?
Yes.
Maybe.
On that note, we have to wrap things up. Thanks to our guests, Robin Robinson, Pat Hughes, and Mary Frances Brakel. To learn more about our show, stories, and guests, log into our website, wycc.org, and look for In the Loop. And next week, we invite you to join us as we talk Chicago politics. February 24th is the mayoral and aldermanic election, and our panel of political experts will weigh in on the upcoming race.
Well, that does it for this week's show. Until next time, I'm Barbara Pinto.
And I'm Chris Bury. Good night.
Good night.